Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, July 18th, 2024. Time for another show. Oh, yeah, I forgot. We have the new sound profile going on. So that was probably a little bit loud. But I think we've boosted the signal yesterday, and we decided that it was okay to keep the dynamic processor on, but boost the signal a little bit. So now I guess I sound like I'm in a more professional kitchen closer to you, but not my kitchen or your kitchen, and very tinny. I don't know. There was several descriptions of the way the sound was going, but I think this seems like the good profile to stick with for the time being. For the now is kind of where I ended up on that one. Okay, it's time to round things up. It is the last show of the week for Greg Dworkin. Ordinarily not the last show of the week for me, but guess what? It is, because I'm going out of town, and I've been saying that, not constantly the whole time. And now I realize, as I get ready to go on here, I haven't said this during Greg's segment or in the lead up to Greg's segment. Greg doesn't know. I need to tell Greg that if you call next week, you're welcome to do that. And you can call and tell Skype test calling all about the news. I was thinking about it, and when I was thinking, oh my gosh, I have to remind him. One of these days, I guess we could arrange for something like where Greg tapes segments and we put it on the air. I don't know. It's just not the same, of course. And it'll be difficult to get through the week. But I think we're in between conventions, so that's good news. I didn't even want to talk about this convention, and really, frankly, neither did he. I think when you get right down to it, it's an ugly convention, and I'm glad it's coming to an end. And it was interesting to see their nominee shot briefly beforehand. It's worked out very well for them. The guy missed, so there you have it. That's all you need to know. I guess he gives a big speech tonight. People will ram parts, take over the airports, what have you. It'll be interesting to see what his ad libs are. J.D. Vance got his star turn yesterday. I don't know anything about it. He bashed Democrats, but that's what the vice presidential nominee will do. So it's not even like he did it in spectacular fashion. But I think the big news for me out of the convention is, for one thing, I'm out of the convention. That's good. There was news, by the way, of a confrontation between, this was not yesterday, but the day before, confrontation between Kevin McCarthy and Matt Gaetz, which was kind of funny, and I saw little clips of I don't know what Kevin McCarthy was doing there, but he was there. And Gaetz was harassing him while he was trying to do a TV stand-up interview. So McCarthy kind of let loose about how much trouble he thought Gaetz was in with the ethics committee, which was also very interesting. And then a bystander, another delegate, and probably someone of some importance, says to him, "Hey, Gaetz, why are you such an a-hole? Don't be such an a-hole. Get out of here." And Gaetz briefly tries to stand up to him and says, "Well, I don't know who you are." And the guy says, "It doesn't matter who I am. Get the hell out of here. Why you got to be such an a-hole?" And he slinks away. So I guess that's one way of getting rid of Matt Gaetz. That's pretty cool. I like that. That was good news to see. Bad news to see for, America, the country, fair people all over the world was something that in years past you would have seen. You would have seen these Democratic dirty trickster infiltrators thrown out on their ear pretty damn quick from the Republican convention in years past, but not this year. A sea of delegates, which means they're not infiltrators and they did this on purpose, waving signs. You know how they have the pre-printed signs for people to distribute them on the floor. This is the message we're trying to carry tonight, saying mass deportation now. That was rather astonishing. And anybody who's still like, well, they're softening, or they're into unity, or Project 2025 doesn't really mean what it says, I don't know what to tell you. Masks off. Mass deportation now signs being waved around like that's the message we wanted to. Really, honestly, before this year I would have said, oh, they're going to be saying tomorrow that those were Democratic infiltrators who were waving that sign to embarrass the Republicans. But those were the signs that the Republicans were giving out. That's where they are. And I don't know. To me, that's the picture of the day. And also J.D. Vance did something. So that seemed to detract from it. But I was that for his speech, maybe? They usually have signs for the big speeches to echo these themes. So I'm not sure. So I'll ask Greg Dworkin because he has maybe some clearer idea of what happened yesterday. No idea? All right. Well, he gave a rotten speech and he was an idiot. I think that's probably a good summary. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. So here's the summary of what I didn't watch.
Okay, great.
This is from Walter Heinekel over at Daily Kos. It says, the highlight of J.D. Vance's speech was the crowd chanting for themselves. It was really a boring speech.
We are great.
And it was so boring that the most enthusiasm from the crowd, writes Walter, who was clearly desperate for something to cheer, came when they started chanting for themselves, because Vance said, you guys are a great crowd. And they started chanting, yes, we are. Yes, we are. That was it. That was the only excitement for the whole speech.
That's a good chant. And it shows a fun spirit among the delegates.
Yeah,
that's nice.
Tailgating,
I mean, minus
and drinking right there at the speech. So I didn't watch it, and it was summarized for me by some of the professionals who didn't watch it, and those who did. For example, Will Bunch, one of my favorite columnists over at the Philadelphia Inquirer, wrote, I'm watching Kristen Welker and Lester Holt drone on and on about how great Republicans are doing on toning it down here. This is as delegates are waving placards say mass deportation now. Now, I don't know why they want to get rid of the state of Massachusetts. I guess they don't like it because they voted for McGovern in 1972, but I don't know.
Maybe it's Massachusetts. If you weren't on the Mayflower, deportation now.
Maybe, but the thing is, these are obviously not homemade signs.
No, they were.
So this is the message that they are trying to convey. It's dark, it's dangerous, it repels people, and the reason this race is competitive, regardless of all the trials and travails of the Democrats, which we'll get to, the reason it's competitive and will remain competitive is that Trump is awful and the Republican Party is awful.
Well, then they're made for one another, yeah.
They tried to do this unity stuff, which, of course, didn't work. But I think I said this on Monday, the Reagan Republicans and the Chamber of Commerce people really hate Vance. The people who like Vance are the Bitcoin people.
Oh,
the tech bros.
I have something for you people next week on Bitcoin.
Yeah, the whole plot here is to tank the economy so Bitcoin is worth even more. And so they're all in on JD Vance. I don't see how that would be.
I mean, I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, I guess you could tank. If you could tank the dollar without tanking the economy, I guess Bitcoin would be all right. But if you tank the economy,
that, but you can't. So it's got to be everything.
But that doesn't make any sense. So what you would spend your money on?
They love the idea that he wants increased tariffs and he's going to start a trade war.
Oh, good.
And Bitcoin's just going to get more and more valuable, and they don't really care about anything else.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe we should grind them into hamburger. Well, I mean, that's policy.
Yeah, you have to look at some of his most prominent billionaire supporters.
Yes.
From Elon Musk.
Oh, well, they might want to grind us into hamburger.
Some of the other guys. I mean, they're all in on Bitcoin. It's amazing.
Peter Thiel, who would like to actually consume your precious bodily fluids for whatever
all
reason.
That stuff. So Will Bunch wrote that about NBC News trying to normalize it, which is, by the way, why I don't watch NBC News anymore.
Oh, well,
years ago I gave it up. I started watching ABC, much more balanced, and then PBS, which itself is an issue because PBS is funded by billionaires, and guess what their point of view is?
Oh, well, maybe the B should be for Bitcoin. Public Bitcoin service.
NPR.
Switch it. Yeah, all right.
Nice, polite Republicans, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
so Mark Jacob,
so ABC does better
Chicago
for you?
Tribune editor, says, this is exactly why I'm not watching. And, as a professional, Mark says this, so as an amateur, I agree with him.
Yeah, I've certainly reached the same conclusion years ago, although a lot of the conclusion was from, I think I'd rather watch a movie. I'm kind of lazy versus, but then, even years ago, watching a even the Democratic convention, I kind of knew what I was going to see. Although this one was very surprising, but now I won't watch because it's infuriating.
Well, it is.
Smash my
American
television.
Carnage back in 2016 is the last time I watched a Republican convention. I'm not watching it anymore.
Yeah. Oh, was that? I thought that was the inaugural speech, but maybe not.
I'm not
whatever.
Sure. You know.
But one of those things.
It was all the same stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's the issue for me. I kind of know. Even like I said, even with the Democratic convention, we're going to create jobs. That's good.
Right.
Opportunity.
So tonight Trump will
excellent.
speak with a maxi
Cool,
cam on his ear. I don't care.
Yeah, and Republicans now, of course, wearing them, and more people I saw photos on the floor wearing these things. By the way, it occurred to me, if they had not done that, and then how many weeks until our convention? I don't know. But the Democratic convention had Democrats then put those things on their ears, they'd be furious. They'd be screaming bloody murder. How dare you? Da-da-da. Now, so they went and did it. And still, if a Democrat were to also do that later, they would still scream, that's outrageous, so disrespectful. When we do it, it's awesome. When you do it, we want to deport you. Look, mass deportation now. Okay.
I don't think there's any new news,
I don't know why we
on
would
the
do it,
shooter.
Well,
in terms of motive, I've seen some stuff fly by. I don't know if it's verified that he had some encrypted chats that
probably
that he had been scouting out the Democratic National Convention as well. I don't know, true, not true, what's going on there.
Me neither.
The guy is like super deeply troubled.
Yes,
that's the only thing you can really take out of it. And
only thing I saw was,
I can't make political hay out of it.
I don't think
I
it's
can
there
push back on the
at
Republicans and say that they're overdoing and overplaying the hand, but they always do.
Yes. Well, yeah, mass deportation now. The only thing I saw was not connected to any actual evidence that I could examine, but it sounded like people were, I didn't read any stories about it, nothing, but I guess other people had read and come to the conclusion or had adopted the conclusion of the reporting, which was that it's what they're able to find. It sort of sounded like the kid said, I think I'd just like to do a famous thing.
Yeah.
And it didn't really matter who. And here, the first candidate to come close to driving distance from my house.
But this came first.
Yeah. But I did learn that the Iranians were, I guess, contemplating this. But I think the Iranian government is always contemplating. If we get a chance to assassinate an American president, I guess we would. Although we probably have war. I don't know.
We may have mentioned that on Monday, but it comes even more as a striking thing that they sort of were in the building but not on top of the building.
Yeah, right. It's all very odd.
Police, law enforcement, Leos.
But yes, and it may be that the Iranian threat, which was, I guess, was taken seriously enough for them to give a specific warning to the Trump campaign, may have been
public.
Yeah, may have been the reason for additional Secret Service assets like counter sniper teams, which apparently are not ordinarily there. So anyway, no more news on that guy, and it may just turn out to be a weird fluky
they went to
thing.
The wrong Four Seasons.
Yeah,
they're probably staking out the wrong venue.
All right, well, look out for weirdos who want to get famous. So, J.D. Vance, one of them's running for vice president. I forgot.
If you have, I'm just saying, I'm an amateur. I'm not a professional.
You want to get famous?
But if I see a guy walking with a gun and a ladder, I'm going to think he's suspicious.
Well, that's extremely dangerous, given how many gun nuts used to tell me that it's not the gun, that could have been the ladder that killed that child or person. Imagine a gun in one hand and a ladder in the other.
Right, guns
and
don't
a swimming pool in their
if he hadn't had the ladder, he never would have shot at Trump,
Yeah, probably not.
Just,
he needed a clear line of sight, although he could have shot just up in the air like July 4th style. And I hit who I hit.
Right. So the big topics besides Vance, the RNC, and fascism, and look, I have to say, Sarah Palin was a much more effective vice presidential candidate, as much as I disliked her.
Oh, at least
she was a decent speaker who captivated a certain segment of the population. You can't say that about Vance.
We haven't seen his fancy pageant walking, so you don't know yet. He might be very,
right, or the talent section.
Alluring.
We haven't seen that yet either.
Right, tap dance, play the cello, what have you.
Right. So that's one of the big topics. The other two, just to mention, because there's not much to say about it other than it's a good excuse for what needs to be done. Biden has COVID.
Yes, right. Oh, yeah. Nah.
Oh, yeah, by the way, why is that important? Great. Well, he's well, so it really shouldn't make much difference. It is going to curtail his campaigning a little bit, but his campaigning was so lackluster, I don't know that anybody's going to notice. The big part here is that back on, as the reporting goes, Friday or Saturday, past Friday or Saturday,
what happened
Pelosi, Schumer, Jeffries, a bunch of heavyweight Democratic leaders went to Biden and said, you got to get out of the race.
Oh.
And Biden resisted. And so yesterday they went public.
Oh.
Which is what's really interesting. So I sent a bunch of stuff to you. Adam Schiff calls on Biden to drop out of the presidential race yesterday.
He's been up to it.
Why did he do it yesterday? Well, a couple of different reasons. He gave Biden a couple of days to chew on what Schumer and Jeffries told him and Pelosi.
No, he's
and
not that
by the way, process point, somebody who follows me kindly let me know, she's from California, that yesterday, the 17th, was the Secretary of State's deadline in California for the California SOS Voter Information Guide. So since the deadline is the 17th, that's effectively the last day you can get kicked off the ballot. So Schiff waited for the last minute to make the statement is what I'm saying.
So super effective. So I guess he wanted to be in the news for calling for that, but not necessarily be the guy that caused it. Not that he would be.
Right. But. So there's that. Benji Sarlin, who's been really good at reporting this stuff, really while watching all this stuff, just fly into view at once, he writes, the visibility into the Biden dropout push was extremely limited before today, even among members. But now, Alex Burns is reporting Pelosi will do everything in her power, that's a quote, to get Biden out of the presidential race, one of her allies told Rachel Bade. On the former House Speaker confronting Biden about the ruin he could inflict on Democrats is a story from Politico that Alex Burns, did he write it? No.
But he was nearby.
Rachel Bade wrote it.
Okay.
Pelosi also warned Biden that some Democratic lawmakers would start to grow louder in their griping about his political weaknesses. According to two people close to Pelosi, she urged the president to make a decision about stepping down soon. I think he needs to.
Okay. Yes, that's true. You do.
I can't help it. I mean, he can't campaign effectively. Now, the upside is that it's been a terrible 3 weeks, including the shooting for Democrats. And what? Trump is only ahead by 1 or 2 points. He's just such a bad candidate.
A terrible week for Trump and the Republicans.
It didn't hurt Trump at all. But it was a terrible week for Democrats because politically the Republicans are trying to make hay and claim the Democrats caused this and they should stop campaigning and they should give up now and all this garbage.
That didn't work at all.
No, none of it worked.
That's
crazy. The race is exactly where it was before.
Right. So I guess it's a lucky break there.
I don't know about lucky. It is what it is. But what I'm saying is that it remains a competitive race. Democrats can still win. I'm not sure they can win with Biden. I don't think Biden's a definite loser. But the people looking at the polls, internal polls, and looking at their own states, they think that he's a loser. The thing is...
Hey, that's not nice.
But they think he's going to lose.
Oh, that. Oh, okay. Yeah, all right.
I mean, he's going to lose this race. They think that it's going to lose this race for them who are running in their own states and districts. Now, the only saving grace there is that political people aren't necessarily the sharpest political operatives. That's why they hire sharp political operatives to run their campaigns.
Yeah, okay. I think I know what you mean. The candidates themselves.
In my political judgment, I think Biden's doomed in my state. Well, your political judgment isn't very good. What do the actual professionals think? You're just running for the seat.
Yeah, okay. And you might not have a fuller picture of the state or even a very good idea of what's happening in your own district. That's possible.
Since you haven't been there in like 6 years.
Yeah. Okay.
So
maybe you don't live in it.
There's all of that. It's complicated. But there's no question that there's nobody's looking at this and saying, well, Biden's a definite sure winner.
I have not heard people say that lately. No,
and you won't. So, the fact that Pelosi, who I think has incredibly good political instincts, and Schumer,
certainly among the members,
them but hides them well. and Jeffries.
They're hidden behind the camera. Yeah.
He has to. He has to support incumbents.
Yes.
And so when somebody who has to support incumbents says to the incumbent, I think you need to step down.
Oh, I see.
That's a BFD.
Well, he has to support House incumbents, certainly. But, you get the idea.
Senate incumbents. He doesn't really have to support House incumbents.
Oh, I thought we had moved to Jeffries. Okay, no, Schumer.
Right. Jeffries, the opposite, sure. I mean, Jeffries has to support House incumbents, but doesn't really much care about the Senate.
Yes.
But when both of them are telling the incumbent president candidate,
but he doesn't,
it's time to step down. I think that what I'm saying is that the pressure is pretty intense, and it's only going to get worse because now everybody's going public. So the idea that this is over, it's not over.
Okay, I thought it was over.
Yeah, well, no, and we said wait and see. Well, now this is the waiting, and this is what we're saying.
Yeah, see, that guy says it too. Yeah. All right, well, now it becomes all the more intriguing in terms of, but now you have to worry about, you're not in the voter guide. Although I would guess California voters will probably figure out who the Democratic nominee is.
Yeah, you don't need a voter guide.
Even if the book says, So I think they got it pretty clear. Probably will be among the biggest news in the nation for several days in a row. So I think the word will get out.
Right. And the other side of the coin, despite what you read, the political professionals that I follow basically say, look, as long as you make a switch before the Democratic National Convention, getting on the ballot and ballot access is simply not an issue.
I mean, I hope so.
Especially if it's Harris.
Yeah. I know that there are states that were already making noise, where the Republicans were making noise about preventing Biden or finding some way or finding a loophole.
Supreme Court. Let's rule on it in 2027.
I'm not super happy about taking those chances, but I mean, it's just, one terrible chance versus another terrible chance.
Well, I mean, if you're making the switch, you're taking a chance. So go for it,
Okay.
That's only one of many chances you're taking if you make a switch.
Very, very interesting to see how it gets navigated if it were to happen. And
that's the process part, but the political part.
I don't know what it
is that it's getting louder and louder and louder. You're going to see, if Biden doesn't step down, you're going to see the letter that was sent to him released, which is probably not flattering. You're going to get internal polls leaked. I mean, the pressure is just ratcheting up.
Well, that is very interesting. I mean, it just didn't seem like they were. The people who were pushing for it were going to go to this length that they would say, well, I tried to make the case privately, but you know how it is publicly. We're just not going to do that. But I guess they are, which means that puts their thinking and their pressure in a different light for me. And I guess
also, it's not like they're throwing up their hands and saying, oh, well, we're losers. We're just going to lose. We accept that. We're passive. We're docile.
We have one of those. What's his name? Jared Golden. That's where he is.
But that's literally okay. He doesn't count.
Yeah.
He's always been that way in a Trumpy district in Maine, and that's just the way he is.
It's very odd. Okay, well, scary, interesting. I wish I could have some confidence that the media would say this is such an unusual story if a switch is made.
They will because it's eyeballs.
Well, that they would say. But now I'm like really rooting for this whole thing. In the way that they were like, well, it's really unusual that there's a Republican candidate who says we should deport everybody and he hates veterans. So let's cover it because it's interesting and it gets eyeballs. And I don't know if they're going to do that for. This drama is interesting. We've covered it for 3 days. I'm afraid they'll stop, but they should then root for the candidate.
Right. But, by the way, I found that reference I was trying to get to with the shooter. This is a reference from Brandy Zadrozny, who's an NBC reporter.
Sure.
But she's referencing the New York Times. And here's the quote. When the FBI was able to finally access Mr. Crook's cell phones and other electronic devices, agents could see he had searched for images of Trump, Biden, Garland, and director Chris Wray.
Huh. I mean,
he also had typed in major depressive disorder and searched for dates and places for appearances for both Biden and Trump.
Oh, well.
Now, it happened one of Trump's planned appearances was early, and it was 50 miles from his house in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, right. Oh, the ice cream truck is coming. Right. Yeah, exactly. I'll just shoot it.
Yeah. So that's what I mean about Republicans overplaying their hand and no real evidence he was anything other than a very deranged and, disturbed person.
Okay. Yeah, that's...
Who, by the way, isn't that great a shot?
Well, yeah.
That's why he was
as snipers
off the rifle team. I mean,
right.
That's part of the history there.
That's true. And also, I am a little bit surprised. I don't know what he was doing. And, how am I going to read his mind when he's troubled as he is? But, like, searching for images of them, if I got in my head, well, Chris Wray, I know who that is, and maybe we'll be famous if we assassinate him. I'd have to look up. I'm shoot the right guy. But Trump, like... I mean, he's wearing hunting blaze orange.
Right. In any case, here's the summary from the Washington Post about this whole affair. Biden had been maintaining an aggressive campaign schedule to demonstrate vigor in the face of doubts among Democrats about his ability to mount a robust campaign. Right. His second COVID diagnosis will sideline him, just as calls among Democratic lawmakers for his removal from the ticket are resuming. And this is the story about Adam Schiff calling for it. Biden has claimed that ordinary Democrats support him, but polls conducted after his shaky performance in his June 27th debate with Trump, told you it was a disaster, have found anywhere between 40 and 65% of Democrats saying the president should drop out of the race. Even 40 is a big number. 65 is a huge number.
Well, you don't want people saying you should drop out of a race.
Not you don't want that. People.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, the COVID really won't help, and it just gives life to the storyline. And I don't know.
And let me just read this to you from Benji Sarlin.
Okay.
Biden ultimately has decided, but the story just today, he was writing yesterday, Democratic leaders telling him he's lost the party, Adam Schiff making opposition public, DNC getting bullied out of an early nomination vote, top fundraiser telling Biden he's out of money, an AP poll saying 2/3 of Democrats want him out, and Democrats are circulating down-ballot memos starting to get real rough.
Well, we'll see how the COVID does. I mean, COVID could be a reason for an exit.
That's what I'm saying. It's a great...
Maybe he doesn't even have COVID. He's just doing it. All right, well, I don't want to get conspiratorial about it, but what else can I do? I can't think of another storyline in the next 3 seconds. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back here to the Kagro Good Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. I have been forced out by Greg. And goodbye, everybody. I don't know. The moving van is waiting for me. Very interesting story. We'll have to see how things develop in the next couple of days. It's I don't know why Adam Schiff really feels like a big state now, and he's a big name, but certainly the real action is among the leaders. That's pretty serious. Wow.
Right. Look, the structure in the Congress is such that if a representative, no matter how well known, unless he's the speaker, says something, or she's this former speaker says something, you go, okay. Yeah. But when a senator says it, especially a prominent senator, it's news.
Yeah,
it's just the way it is.
It is, even though some of those senators represent fewer people than some people in the House, but nobody does that calculation.
Well, if it's an obscure senator,
There are several.
If it's a Kevin Kramer or if it's Marsha Blackburn, you don't pay too much attention. But if Lindsey Graham says something, it's always news.
Oh yeah,
if Adam Schiff says something, it's news because he's running for Senate and
in
he's
a big
name.
state. Big state, big name. He did the whole impeachment things.
Yeah.
Got it.
And of course, if Schumer and Jeffries and Pelosi say stuff.
Yeah, everybody should be. All right. Well, they're all hanging on those words. All right. Yep. Well, duly noted.
Meanwhile, we have to be clear.
I can't quit.
J.D. Vance is Putin's guy.
Oh.
And our foreign policy expert, David Rothkopf, has a piece about that. Trump Vance is Putin's dream ticket. Russia will now double down on trying to steal the 2024 election. So you can expect a lot of garbage, trolls, and other Russian bots on places like Twitter. It's just going to get worse because they see an opening. You can see it in terms of how people respond. If you don't see it directly or don't wish to see it from Russia, you can see it from Israel, where Netanyahu's doing everything possible to see if he can get in Trump's good graces again, because Trump is still mad at him for congratulating Biden on when he won. And so Trump was mad at Netanyahu, and Netanyahu looks at Vance and Haley and says, I see a path. I know what to do. All I have to do is get down on my knees and beg, and he'll be okay.
Yeah, that usually does the trick.
It always does the trick with him.
And now gratuities are available.
Well, see, the only thing different is that Trump's preferred way is that you humiliate yourself publicly.
That's his goal.
And I'm not sure Netanyahu wants to do that. So they're still negotiating.
Yeah. But if you need suggestions about how you could humiliate yourself, you can call. I'll speak with you. Submit to prosecution. That's one. But he's looking to avoid that. Otherwise, I don't know. Yeah, what's humiliating enough for Netanyahu? But probably personal begging would do the trick.
Right.
And Trump would make up the fact that he did it anyway, even if he doesn't do it, if he wants to repair the relationship. He was begging me, please endorse me.
So Rothkopf goes on to say, although it's been a reality since 2016, it's astonishing to me how the Republican Party, which once prided itself on patriotism and national security know-how, has become the party of Putin, an active ally of one of America's most overt and dangerous enemies. And as remarkable as this shift has been, it's important we realize that in choosing Vance, the party and its leader have emphatically said, that's who we are. Macedonia to democracy, to Ukraine, to NATO, to American global leadership, and to the safety and security of future generations of Americans. That's the only thing that's at stake in this election. Okay. And there are people who feel that strongly. And again, that's one of the reasons why the election remains competitive.
Yeah. Well, as we have said on this program from before anybody thought it was anything but a hilarious joke, political union with Russia to own the globalists. That's the plan, where we're going to kick out the globalists and merge our interests with our former greatest geopolitical rival.
Right. So this is a piece from Greg Sargent from The New Republic.
Yeah.
Trump's ugly new post-shooting rant instantly wrecks his unity pivot. Trump's idea of unity, everybody just needs to unify around putting him above the law. So it's up to media to really kind of resist this. And as we see with NBC News, they're doing a terrible job, but we knew that.
Yeah, well, that's too bad. It's interesting that you see a differentiation between them and ABC. You prefer ABC. That's interesting for people who are comparison shopping.
ABC's a lot more even-handed about just about all of this stuff. NBC really leans Republican now. And you could see that the interview that Lester Holt did with Biden was awful, not because of Biden. It was awful because of Holt.
Wow. A lot of complaints, certainly. And I know, just thinking back to, I didn't get to ask, did we talk about the fact that, it must have been Monday, when Morning Joe was canceled.
Yeah, we talked about that, and they canceled for a day. Now they're back.
Did he come back and did he say anything?
I don't worry them.
It's just an interesting thing. And are they under either new ownership or executive?
No.
Whatever, or something. I don't know. Because sometimes that happens with
the problem for the cable companies is they're losing audience, so they're trying to figure out the best way to stem the bleeding. And to an executive, it's don't be controversial. Well, controversy is why they watch you.
But
dummy.
Crossfire, they thought that would get eyeballs, and they cover Trump because he's controversial.
But Maddow and Nicole
so they
Wallace
said we should not be controversial.
Watch, or Lawrence O'Donnell. They watch for that.
I guess so, because that's the only data they have. I mean, they don't know how.
Those are their big shows.
Charlie Kirk would do. I guess maybe we'll test that out. Let's put them on, but I don't think so. All right, well, very weird, and it's worth knowing if you're going to have to choose a network. You lean that way, and people may be looking for a recommendation.
Yeah, I haven't spent a lot of time watching CBS. The signal isn't all that great. In this area, even on cable.
You use one of those air things.
It's just odd. In New York City, of course, everything is equal. You get just as strong a signal from WPIX as you do from NBC. It's all at the top of the Empire State Building, et cetera. But out here in the boonies, some signals are stronger than others. And even the way that the cable networks put the stuff out there. For example, CBS in New York would be Channel 2 out here.
Right.
For years, Channel 3 would be the Connecticut equivalent of it.
Oh.
But it's like a UHF instead of a VHF network, and so it's really they don't have it. It's not on there.
Interesting.
And so if you want to watch the local news followed by the national news, you wind up watching NBC and ABC.
Yeah,
because that's it.
Well, that's kind of how I remember. Well, you should write some sort of a elegy about that because it's so difficult.
Yeah, but be careful about the language.
Yes, right. I don't know what you want to call yourself, but elegy isn't the problem.
Right.
Okay. Well, so much for the whole presidential race and the future of America.
Yeah, there you have it.
Thank you.
So in terms of the press, I do have this interesting piece here from Wes Lowry, one of my favorite reporters, who's now at the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University.
Wow.
Sounds all highfalutin.
I thought Columbia University was burned to the ground.
Elite. New York is a hellhole, so nobody can reach Columbia. It's right in the middle of the city. But it's called The Right to Know.
All right. Do I have one?
Yes, sort of.
Okay.
Basically, what he's trying to do is make a case for federal public trust for media. In other words, restore the funding for NPR and PBS so that they could cover things reasonably.
I don't see that happening.
And he has a really interesting introduction to this, which is stuff I was unaware of.
Okay.
So in June 1945, the United States Supreme Court issued a 4,900-word opinion that significantly curbed the power of an aspiring monopoly known at the time, and still, as the Associated Press.
Oh. All right.
And that's because the wire service adopted two new bylaws. The first one allowed its 1,200-member newspapers. Remember, back in the 40s, people read newspapers.
Yes.
They allowed its member newspapers to block their competitors from joining the service. So let's say you were in Washington and there was a Washington Post and a Washington Times.
There was.
And a Washington Examiner.
An Eagle.
The Post, which was a member of AP, could prevent, it's like a blue slip for locals, they could prevent the other two newspapers from joining the service.
Oh. Okay.
Why is that important? Because the Second Amendment that they added to their Constitution
I see.
Said, and if you're not a member of the service, you can't use our stuff.
Yeah. Well, that I would have thought.
News organizations that were members of the AP had access to news from around the country and the world. Remember, this is 1945. There wasn't cable. There wasn't the internet. So papers that had access to AP had access to the world. Papers that weren't part of AP couldn't print the stuff that was coming from AP around the world, and you couldn't join, and you weren't allowed to access it, and they could prevent you from accessing it.
The second part does not seem all that unusual. If you're not a member of the service, you can't use our service. I got that.
Right.
Yeah, blocking your competitors.
And you can't be a member of the service.
Yeah.
So when you put either one alone is okay, but when you put them together, the Supreme Court ruled that these new policies were antitrust violations under the Sherman Act, and that explicitly prohibits businesses from banding together to undercut their competition, and that's what they were doing.
All right.
So the AP argued in front of the Supreme Court that the government was infringing on its constitutionally protected press freedom.
To not let anybody...
And that great champion of the First Amendment, that's not sarcastic, Hugo Black, rejected the argument and said the First Amendment doesn't allow the AP to run non-member papers out of business.
Yeah.
In fact, he asserted that the constitutional provision functioned to ensure the opposite. The First Amendment, he wrote, rests on the assumption that the widest possible dissemination of information from diverse antagonistic sources is essential to the welfare of the public, and a free press is a condition of a free society.
I wonder if you would get that ruling now.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than simply a ban on government interference, Black identified in the First Amendment an affirmative right held by each American to have access to the news, which is interesting. Now, Black's son would later recall his father believed press freedom meant more to the preservation of our democratic republic than any other part of the Constitution, even as he believed it was necessary to break up concentrated media power and disperse the power more equitably.
Yes.
Equitably.
Huh. Well,
very interesting point of view.
I think I will have to read that a little more closely.
Yeah.
It is interesting.
Half a century later, Ralph McGill expanded on this idea, declaring freedom of the press is not the personal property of any one editor or publisher or of any association of them. It is not something that can be locked in the safe at night. It's merely one of the guarantees of the people. It's their property. So now you have all these media conglomerates, Elon Musk, billionaires, owning the press directly, influencing them in terms of contributions to places like NPR. I don't think that's what Hugo Black had in mind.
No, certainly I don't think he even just 50 years ago envisioned the proliferation of billionaires. That's been a tremendous development that's changed a lot. But yeah, it's a very weird thing, and also just a very weird business model that AP was trying to impose. The idea of we are going to enforce this provision to have less clients, as opposed to, well, anybody can buy the stuff. The more client newspapers, the better. You can't use it without paying for it. That seems simple enough.
Right.
But we want every newspaper in Washington to buy our product. It's weird.
Yeah. So in this article, just an informational point, in the 40s, America was a nation of about 133 million residents with 44 million newspaper subscriptions.
Wow.
So there was practically a newspaper in every household.
Almost as many as guns.
Circulation continued to climb through the 80s, and then the internet, and then we went into the abyss. By 2022, there were just 20.9 million American newspaper subscriptions compared to 44. There was less than half, with a population much bigger.
Yes.
The population doubled, and the newspaper subscriptions got cut in half.
Yeah. Well, a lot of factors in that. They probably could have figured out a better approach to the... AP could have been a dominant player now if they had said, well, everybody can join the AP and get the news for one low price or something like that. But yeah, the internet also convinced us that news was free.
Right. So again, this is Wes Lowry writing, a professional journalist.
Yes.
And he says, through that lens, it should not be surprising to see studies like a recent report published in the Columbia Journalism Review, which examined political coverage that appeared on the front pages of the Times and its chief rival, the Washington Post, during the months leading up to the 2022 midterm elections. The study found that our nation's leading news organizations had provided coverage that offered, quote, little insight into policy, end quote.
Yeah.
Researchers found that out of the Times' 219 front-page articles about domestic politics, 10 explained domestic policy in any detail. On the front page of the Post, just 4 out of 215. And not a single one probed the policies that candidates aim to bring to the fore. So the fact that they don't cover Project 2025 as deeply as they should, they've been doing that for years.
Yeah. The drama of it is whatever. Is what draws their attention.
Yeah, and Lowry calls it political theater criticism, and he says that's what they do. They do horse race and they do theater criticism.
He very strongly want to.
Trump was ahead, and the optics of it, of him getting shot and putting a big maxi pad on his ear, are such that it reminds you of mission accomplished. How does that help you?
I don't know. I mean, I wonder if it just came down to, well, reading and understanding policy, very hard and labor intensive. Watching TV and saying, that guy looks very strongly strong is a little easier. But I guess television, dominance of television, visual medium, and of course, if they even tried, to explain policy, whether it was the politicians themselves or the journalists, even on shows that are supposed to be giving an hour on Sunday over to that, well, we'll have to leave it there because it's time to hear from Mop and Glow.
Right. So that's why he goes on to say, this persists because the underlying financial realities. For the companies that control media, journalism befitting our democracy is simply not a viable business plan.
Yeah.
It can't win ratings wars. It doesn't sell papers. It doesn't get traffic. And it doesn't produce the kind of profits needed in order to keep owners, executives, shareholders, and their offspring happy and firmly planted within the American aristocracy.
Oh.
Adequately informing the whole of the public and maximizing profits are incompatible aims. So basically, he says you got to destroy the distinction. You got to draw a distinction between a media system that prioritizes news and one that aims to disseminate information. That's what happened when I guess it was ABC under Roone Arledge that first combined the sports and news divisions into an infotainment division, and it's been downhill ever since. So what the government's actually doing or not doing, how best to understand and contextualize societal occurrences is almost never relayed in our news. The news is context-lacking micro updates, scenes cut from the soap opera. And although truth has tangible value, that's not what we get. And that's why he makes the case, and it's a really long piece, that really there should be public funding so they can get away from that and get back to the news. That's the bottom line. That's what NPR used to be, and that's what it ain't now.
That's true. And I guess it's certainly one theory of how to get there, and it's the clearest path, I guess, that we have any experience with. There may be another way to get there, but I don't know how you engineer it. But yeah, it's an interesting change, news as a business and infotainment as a business, and not just a business, but I mean, I guess like CEOs in every other sector too, and the higher ups got this idea that, well, there are other companies where the brass are billionaires. Why can't we extract the same amount of money and make ourselves billionaires? And I guess back in the 40s, being the newspaper man, the head of the local paper, you're well-to-do. You probably joined the country club and everything, but you're not a billionaire. And it was fun, like banking was way back then as well. We take a small percentage, keep your money for it. We're not doing anything spectacular, but now they have to feel like they have to do weird things and offer all kinds of crazy instruments that offer them the opportunity to take bigger fees, and that a bank president should be a millionaire, billionaire even, is kind of a new concept, and the news coverage suffers from it, and there aren't newspaper owners really who are all about the service to the First Amendment and to the country, and I make a living at it, but rather I'm in business. I want to accumulate as many billions as I can, and the thing I sell you is either, I don't know, it's either going to be hamburgers or paper with words on it. I don't care, just so long as I make $1 billion. And I guess the product that gets you closest is, well, produce it for nothing and don't think about things too much. Okay. Except the country suffers.
So
not before I die.
You may recall, by the way, on the show at various times.
I know everything about this show.
I referred to Trump as being a real good friend of Vince McMahon.
Oh.
And the whole thing, is wrestling.
Yes,
heels and faces and stuff like that. You remember that stuff?
I do. Yeah.
So 2 senior campaign officials just announced that Hulk Hogan will speak tonight at the RNC convention ahead of former President Trump.
Yeah, although he's got a very interesting connection, and I imagine this has as much to do with it as the love of wrestling, is he was the one, he was involved in the lawsuit with Gawker that was financed by Peter Thiel that kind of first put him in our news scope. There's a weird connection there. That he played some sort of role in like the evil billionaire weirdo undermining of the liberal-ish side of the news world, sinking Gawker and suing people for lots of money. And I don't know how exactly. I can't describe exactly how it happened, but I know that story is there.
Dr. Evil with his pinky on his mouth.
So Hulk Hogan,
$1 million.
How old is Hulk Hogan now?
I don't know.
I'll have to look that one up.
Another interesting piece of news just came across the Transom. Carl Quintanilla is reporting there are growing indications that a Biden exit from presidential race would be good for the U.S., said Senator John Hickenlooper.
Holy moly. Okay.
And I this was sent to me by Anthony Michael Crease, the legal from Georgia State, who's great on looking at legal cases.
Okay.
And I think it helps to underline why people in one profession, there's a logical fallacy associated with this, why people who are experts in one profession aren't necessarily experts on everything.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Okay. So he looked at Hickenlooper and said, on the one hand, it seems like the noise indicates a real shift is happening with Biden, which is true. And then he does, on the other hand, all the leaked conversations and reported whispers make me think members of Congress are just chit-chatting with journalists. Because Biden isn't moving that much. Hello, it's public pressure to make him move.
Yeah, that's true.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be talking about it. They've been very good on discipline up until now. This is a concerted effort. That's why everybody's doing it at once.
Okay.
Stick to the legal issues. Stay away from the politics.
Man. Okay. Hulk Hogan.
He's great, by the way. I love him, but not for analyzing politics.
I guess not. And Hulk Hogan is 70. So there you go. And in fact, it's almost his birthday. August 11th, he'll be 71.
It's a great age, I have to say.
Terrific. And
one of my favorite ages.
Are you interested in growing one of those mustaches?
Or developing forearms and biceps like his? No.
No? How about just wearing a bandana?
Is it a bandana or is it a maxi pad? I can't tell.
He may have both by the time he shows up tonight. It will look like he's wearing two, but that's on his face, but that's just his mustache.
So didn't Hulk Hogan become Hollywood Hogan? Why is he Hulk Hogan again?
I don't know. I don't think I remember that well enough. That seems like maybe his disco phase. I don't know. Hollywood Hogan, it rings a bell, and I don't know. Was he in trouble?
That's when he went from champ to heel. That's when he went from face to heel.
Okay. I was wondering, like, did Marvel sue him over Hulk or something? What happened?
I don't know.
Okay, I
don't watch that
couldn't
stuff.
Tell you. Okay, well, he's speaking tonight. That's terrific. I guess he's sort of still a celebrity. I'd be curious to ask the delegates there. Do you know who this is and why he's here? Yeah, I the coin toss as to how many of them know and understand. I'd be curious too, like Charlie Kirk types. Do you guys know Hulk Hogan? Your age? Do Turning Point activists know Hulk Hogan from wrestling? I'd be curious to find out, but I cannot figure out why I want to know that. What difference could this possibly make? It's a very weird lineup of speakers, and like I said, if their vice presidential choice is going to be an online pick, I guess their speaking lineup is too. Also, I guess people watching last night want to know if Matt Gaetz got a facelift. He's looking very weirdly taut across the face there. And I don't know whether that's something he felt he needed to do in order to, look like he could still be hanging out with 17-year-olds or what. But no word on that. He just was awkward and weird, and a lot of weird people got weird makeovers apparently for their star turns. And I don't know. That's the only thing I'm taking away from this convention. I'm staying away from this convention.
Last piece of info.
Yeah.
New poll, reasonably just out, which is to say I just saw it. This is from Split Ticket, which is a relatively new outfit. Laksha Jain and others, and a pretty good analyst.
Okay, yeah.
And this is from Data for Progress. And what it is Black battleground voters and what they think, favorable, unfavorable.
Okay.
Just because there's been all this discussion, so here's some data.
I love data.
Black voters in battleground states. Give a name. Barack Obama. 74% favorable and other 16% somewhat favorable.
Okay, sure.
That brings you up to 90.
All right. What, 10% didn't know?
Some small percentage don't like him. 10% don't like him.
Oh, okay. I see. All right. I thought the 10% was we didn't get an answer from. All right. Yeah, 90% approval.
Right. Democratic Party, 42 and 36.
Yeah.
It's 78%. And 20% don't like him.
Oh, okay. I
don't like the Democratic
You're giving a strong approval and somewhat approval.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Combine them. Kamala Harris, 45 and 30. So 75% approval.
Yeah.
Biden gets 72%.
All right.
Trump gets 19 and the Republican Party gets something like 18.
Yeah.
So in other words, smart. If you want to look at the positive, negative, make it easier for you. Barack Obama is a plus 80. Democratic Party is a plus 58. Harris is a plus 53. Biden's a plus 46. Trump's a minus 61. And the Republican Party is a minus 59.
Yeah.
I don't see a major realignment from the Democrats to the Republicans, but Harris does just as well, if not a little better, than Biden.
Okay.
And, it'd be very risky if Biden does step down for it not to be Harris.
Yeah. No, two separate conversations. We've kind of separated those out for a long time. That the only thing that makes any sense there is if you're talking about this equation, you're talking about Biden or Harris
for
not
multiple reasons,
from out of the blue.
Procedural. But this is just more evidence that if you go from Biden to Harris, it's not like it craters with black voters. Well, if that's what people are telling you, that's not what this shows.
No, people are telling me the opposite, and so I'm fine with that. That's a good answer.
You have good people.
Yeah, apparently I do. I don't know I don't know who would. I don't know how you can get
James
that idea past me. Really?
Want Whitmer and Shapiro.
Well, I know who they want,
stuff like that.
But I haven't heard any of them say, "Oh yeah, you're gonna really piss off the black voters if you let Kamala Harris run." What? Why would that happen? I know everything I know about her says the opposite. I gotta go. But I would really like to have Whitmer, so I have to leave. That's it.
Bye.
Okay. All right. So
see you in a week.
Yeah, see you in a week.
Not the coming week, but the week after.
Whenever we see one another, it will be a week.
And whenever we see each other, it won't be seeing each other.
Right.
We do this all by voice.
That's true too. And thank goodness for it. Thanks, Greg. Yeah. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Now what am I going to do? It's me in the morning, and I don't have anything to tell you because, yes, I do. I had some stories set aside. I am trying to prepare for my week away, including informing Greg that would happen. I mean, I have been mentioning it, but, when he's here, I let him talk, and we talk about the things he brings, and then I'm reminded afterwards, oh, yeah, by the way, I should tell everybody I'm going to be going away. And then I realize, Greg's gone. I haven't told him. So now he knows. So we're on the same page with that one. And let me give you some of the news that I have put aside for discussion. One other thing we probably could have tried to sneak it in our discussion of the convention news. But again, since neither of us were watching, it was difficult to remember. I'll never remember where I was when I found out this news because I didn't find it out except I do know where I was. I was at the kitchen table where I read most of the news. And here it is. Among the other disgraceful things that have to do with the Republican National Convention and the dumb things that they did at it, another dumb speaker, not Hulk Hogan, but Peter Navarro. Now, you might be saying, if you haven't already heard the news, Peter Navarro, how did he make a speech at the Republican National Convention? Did he do it by video from prison? That's crazy. They really wanted him to do that? Are they going to have Steve Bannon do that? And the answer is no, he did it in person. And you might be saying, oh my goodness, Peter Navarro tunneled out of prison and crawled through a sewer system and escaped. And I might have agreed that was the most reasonable explanation for his release had I not read that, in fact, he has finished his term. But he may very well have crawled through a sewer system anyway, but he didn't have to. So we have that. Here's the news from, you'll never believe it, the Associated Press. I feel like I'm in on the conspiracy now. Ex-Trump advisor, he's ex-Trump. Peter Navarro, just released from prison, gets roaring applause at the RNC. He got out of prison. He gave back, or I guess, do you have to give back your orange jumpsuit on the way out, or do you get to keep it? It's a souvenir. Would you like the souvenir mug? Here's have a nice frosty Coke, and it says your federal penitentiary name on it, whatever. But I mean, I know you get your own stuff back. Oh, I know. I see in the movies that they give you your own stuff back. And I imagine he reported to prison probably in a suit because that's his natural, his natural outfit there. But probably a friend or relative came and picked him up and they brought a suit. But I mean, I think he had to leave and go immediately to the Republican National Convention. I wonder, did he get to go home and change there, or did they bring clothes? I don't know. That's not the important part of the story, but I like to imagine it anyway. Here it is. So, ex-Trump advisor, and now he, of course, he's an advisor to somebody else, right? No, he's going to be right back where he left off. Leaves prison and goes directly to the Republican National Convention and gets cheered because law and order. The law doesn't apply to them. Their convicted felons are good guys. It's all there. Former Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro took the stage at the Republican National Convention, which is really difficult to do. It's a very large stage. I don't know where the rest of the people who came after him spoke, but he steals everything that isn't nailed down, this guy. And that stage was nailed down, and he still stole it. Unless I'm misunderstanding what they mean by this. Jill Colvin and Thomas Beaumont. Why didn't you make it clearer? Former trade advisor Peter Navarro took the stage at the Republican National Convention to enthusiastic cheers. There was enthusiasms for it, right? Enthusiastic cheers hours after being released from prison and pushed talk of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol to the center of an event that has largely avoided mentioning the riot. And he didn't get the memo. Didn't you get the memo that we're avoiding January 6th? No, I was in prison. I don't get memos. Hooray! That's what they said. Navarro left a Miami prison, which is a weird one for him to be in, but left a Miami prison in the morning, completing a 4-month sentence for refusing to cooperate with a congressional investigation into the attack by a mob of former President Donald Trump's supporters trying to stop the certification of his loss to Democrat Joe Biden. He then took a flight to Milwaukee. I am curious, did he go home? Where is his home, Peter Navarro? I don't know. Was there a pit stop? I really am curious about, did they pick him up with a suit and an hairbrush? I see him with an electric razor in the back of the car. I just got out of prison. Where are you going? Disney World? No, Republican National Convention. More or less the same thing for me. Flew straight to Milwaukee. I'm curious how many hours. They said hours after being released, but is it 1 hour or was it 18? And he went home and he had some breakfast, and that's less glamorous to me than the very glamorous idea that he got out of prison and then the next building he entered, well, I guess was the airport. And then after that, the Republican National Convention. And also it's interesting, I guess there's rules you can waive on somebody's orders. I don't know who gets to order this. And I guess since he's finished his sentence, you're supposed to get out of the guy's way. Although you know how we are about former felons in some other states. They're not allowed to vote. I was just sort of curious. Hey, Secret Service, the next guy coming into the room to greet the candidate, Donald Trump, before taking the stage, just got out of prison. Are you okay with this? Well, we know who he is. He's a famous white guy, just got out of prison. So I guess it's okay. Oh, he doesn't look all that white. Oh, no, that's fake tan. Oh, okay. Well, then let him through, I guess. So, okay, he took a flight to Milwaukee, and then when arriving and getting to speak, immediately Navarro attacked the committee that led the investigation and cast his time in prison as a sign of loyalty to Trump. Right out of the bat, right out of the starting gate, I guess. The J6 committee demanded that I betray Donald John Trump to save my own skin, my own wrinkly, leathery skin. And I refused. And thank you for pointing out what should be glaringly obvious to everybody, but I have to remind people to think about from time to time. Peter Navarro was asked, tell the truth about what you know about Donald Trump and what he did on January 6th and running up to January 6th and in the aftermath. What did Donald Trump do? What did he have in mind? And he said, I'd rather go to prison. You know, that works for Trump supporters, of course, but for the rest of the country, it should be, you know, they're blacklisted. We can't deal with this person. We can't have them in public life. They can't speak at the convention. That's crazy, but that's not what they believe. And Steve Bannon is in prison right now under the same conditions. Just all you have to do is tell the truth about what you know and what you saw. No, I'd rather go to prison and speak at the convention. His remarks were the first extended mention of the Capitol riot during the first 3 days of the RNC after programming that has been heavily focused on the economy, sort of, national security, sort of, and immigration, definitely. But Trump often mentions the riot in his rallies and speeches, and why not? It's the home crowd. There's so many January 6th defendants are delegates at this convention. So he brings it up usually in his rallies, and many in his GOP base argue that the hundreds of people jailed on charges related to the riot have been wrongly prosecuted. I went to prison so you won't have to, Navarro told the raucous crowd. I am your wake-up call. Except you all may have to go eventually. Navarro received some of the most thunderous applause of convention speakers to date. Ooh, don't let Donald Trump know that. Don't compare the two. With one woman yelling out, I love you, Peter. That's just weird. Navarro spoke for more than 10 minutes, one of the longest speeches yet. He's had a lot to say. He's been imagining, he's pacing back and forth in his cell. You got to let the guy let the words out. One of the longest speeches yet about what he calls the lawfare jackals that he blamed for locking him up, the police. He embraced his fiance on stage to wild cheers. Oh, he got a jailhouse fiance. Congratulations. Someone was writing him while he was in prison, I guess. The scene was the sort of spectacle common at Trump rallies where the presidential nominee routinely calls those convicted of crimes on January 6th hostages. But there hasn't been a similar moment at a convention because that's awfully unusual, which has so far largely avoided talk about Trump's push to overturn his 2020 loss because he's softening. He's a more moderate Trump, you see, the press will tell us. In an interview before his speech, Navarro told the Associated Press that he was just one example of what many on the right say is the Biden administration's use of the judiciary to punish its political enemies, by which they mean, of course, maintaining an independent and independently funded judiciary that weighs the facts and allows juries of these folks' peers to decide these cases in many instances. And sometimes they opt for a bench trial, and that's their own fault. And they're found guilty. That's the weaponization of the judicial system, using the judicial system the normal way and letting citizens decide who's innocent and guilty. Well, anyway, I'm a small part of the bigger issue, Navarro said, referring to the oft-repeated claim by conservatives that during President Joe Biden's administration, the justice system has been used to hobble Trump and those who commit crimes. Oh, those who are close to him. I'm sorry. If we don't control the government will control us, Navarro said. That's an interesting restatement of the usual accusation, which is, of course, a confession, that we're only being cruel and autocratic because we believe the other side will do it first if we don't. So, even though it's, not at all discussed on the other side. But they just imagine if we're interested in autocracy it's probably because they are, and we just need to go first. All right. Well, the telephone interview that I guess he held with the AP took place as Navarro was awaiting takeoff from a Florida airport for the trip to Milwaukee. Just as J.D. Vance is an extremely online pick, Peter Navarro comes from that 1980s businessman mold that Donald Trump comes from, and I guess that's why he likes him so much, that it is somehow, I don't know, a sign of success and maybe even masculinity and toughness if you have a cell phone constantly glued to your head and you're talking in an airport. I'm talking to you right before I get on a plane. I'm a very busy guy. I need to tell the AP that I've learned nothing in prison. Even though I'm about to come and do a 10-minute televised speech saying the same, it's important to me to do this on a cell phone first. There you have it. So, despite his echo of a common GOP refrain that the Biden administration has weaponized the judicial system to punish Trump and his allies, Navarro said he planned to offer a message of unity, and then he didn't. A common theme among Republicans in light of the assassination attempt on the former president Saturday. They should probably just drop that at this point and just say, what we all, I think, know to be the truth. Despite his echo of a common refrain, right, that there's a weaponization going on, that doesn't fit at all with the unity thing. But what happened was he did get a memo after he got out, maybe on the drive over to the airport, to say unity something something. I'm offering a message of unity because of the assassination attempt. P.S. We're political prisoners. We're hostages. Biden is the worst. He's weaponized everything. It's us or them. Kill them all. Let God sort them out. Unity. I mean, they should point out this unity thing is, clown stuff. Anyway, to win the election, we have to unite. That's unity. Not just the Republican Party, but the entire country, Navarro said, and that's not actually even true. I'm going to reach out to Democrats disenchanted with the radical left. How? By saying I'm going to. Many, quote, mainstream Democrats, he believes, are, quote, disenfranchised, disengaged, and disgusted, the 3 Ds, with the radical left. Well, I'm disenfranchised from the radical left, sure. First of all, there's no franchise. And second of all, what difference would it make? I don't know. That's a dumb thing. Am I disengaged with the radical left? Sure. So what? That doesn't matter. Disgusted? I don't even know if I am disgusted with them. It doesn't matter. The radical left. But, of course, he believes any mainstream Democrat, wine moms, people on the street who say, I don't like Trump. I don't mind everything that he said. Not Democrats, but your average independent, right? I don't mind, all of his policies. I like the tax cuts, but I wish he would just shut his mouth. Oh, you're radical left. So, okay. Am I disengaged and disenfranchised and disgusted with those guys? No. Anyway, unity is my message. And I know that since I got out of prison. They did send me a memo. Trump has accused the Justice Department of targeting him politically with indictments in 2 criminal cases, even after the department also brought tax and gun charges against Biden's own son, Hunter. Hunter Biden, they helpfully point out, was convicted on 3 felony charges last month. A federal judge in Florida this week dismissed one of Trump's federal cases, which accused him of hoarding classified documents, you could just say stealing, at his Mar-a-Lago estate. The Justice Department plans to appeal. Attorney General Merrick Garland has forcefully defended the independence and integrity of the Justice Department against what has been described as unprecedented attacks by Republicans. The idea that politics infects our prosecutions, nothing could be further from the truth. We have one rule, we follow the facts, and we follow the law. That's 2. And we make the appropriate decisions. That's 3. Okay. Still, Navarro said Democrats are a potentially fertile voting bloc for Trump. They're not. That he plans to try to reach in his convention speech. I doubt it. Trump won in 2016 in large part. Let's hear their analysis of it. By carrying once Democratic swaths of states carried by former President Barack Obama in 2012, including Iowa, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, by about 10 votes. Just like Donald Trump, I am fighting for important principles, Navarro said. Navarro was the first senior Trump administration official to be locked up for a crime. Congratulations. Related to the January 6th attack when he reported a federal prison in Miami in March. I wonder if he knew then that he was going to be out the day the convention started. They know the dates. He has called his convention, he's called his conviction, same thing, the partisan weaponization of the judicial system. But haven't we already said that? He was subpoenaed by, here's the background of how he ended up in prison. We know that already. Steve Bannon reported to prison earlier this month. They mentioned the House committee that, ended up being the reason the guy got locked up. Spent 18 months investigating the deadly insurrection before along the way, interviewing more than 1,000 witnesses. What weaponization? Okay, I mean, it sounds like they kind of got somewhere with the investigating the truth. And, all right. Anyway, you know the rest of the story. You know why he got locked up, etc., etc. Okay. Well, let's move on from there. I've got a couple other pieces to share with you. And, oh, yeah, look at that. Scott has sent me an interesting article on somebody we have mentioned before. Can I get this article? Let's take a look. How much of it will let me see, because it's from Fortune magazine, not a magazine I'm frequently reading on account of not having a fortune, but I can have Fortune magazine. It's aspirational. All right. We'll see how much the pocket version allows me to read, if it'll register at all. I think I need to refresh. But, well, I'll give you the headline, and we'll see what I can read here as well. Chinese magnate with a red Lamborghini and super yacht. Can you guess who that might be? Convicted for bilking $1 billion from investors. And man, if you're going to bilk big is the lesson here, because, you want to live it up before you end up going to prison. Ava Benny Morrison is the writer here. Ava, I guess. But it could be Ava, and I don't know. Benny Morrison, Benny, like Benny and the Jets, but this time Benny and the Morrisons. Chinese magnate with red Lamborghini and super yacht. I mean, those are just things that he had. It wasn't that they were co-defendants in this. Convicted for bilking $1 billion from investors. What investors? I don't know. What billionaire? It was, well, how come they don't, put his entire name there? All right, and this is interesting. So the pocket version of this doesn't start the same way as the online version, but the online, the regular website version is paywalled. But exiled Chinese tycoon Guo Wengi, we've definitely mentioned him before, and he's the guy who's, when they say super yacht, that's the one that Bannon was living on, amazingly enough, when he was arrested, one of the several times that he was arrested. The prison sentence he's doing now is not actually connected to the other one that he was arrested on when he was living on Guo Wengi's yacht. And I don't, by the way, he's just such a mysterious figure. Like, how does he cobble this lifestyle together for himself while running as the economic populist salt of the earth party guy with the billionaire as the candidate? Nothing makes any sense here. But exiled Chinese tycoon Guo Wengi, whose crusade against the Communist Party attracted allies including Donald Trump associate Stephen Bannon, who's now in jail, was convicted for duping investors out of $1 billion to fund his luxury lifestyle. Well, golly. So now I'll switch over to the pocket version of this. I don't know whether it's skipping a lot or a little, but after a trial in Manhattan that lasted almost 2 months, Guo was found guilty on Tuesday. I will gladly find him guilty on Tuesday for a crime committed several years ahead of time, for fraud and racketeering conspiracy, convicted on 9 of the 12 counts against him. Now, he did better than Donald Trump in that respect. He faces as many as 20 years in prison on the most serious charges when he is sentenced on November 19th. after the election. So we'll see. Guo brazenly operated several interrelated fraud schemes, all designed to fleece his loyal followers out of their hard-earned money so that Guo could spend his days in his 50,000 square foot mansion, driving his $1 million Lamborghini or lounging on his $37 million yacht. Next to shambling mound Steve Bannon, apparently. Manhattan U.S. Attorney Damian Williams said in a statement after the verdict. So he's sentenced on November 19th, and if he can stretch out, release for the days between his sentencing and when he needs to report to prison, if he can stretch it out to January and Donald Trump takes power, however he chooses to do so. And I mean, it may take an extended power struggle and civil war in the country to bring him to power. I don't know how long Guo has to stretch things out before he comes to collect a pardon such that he can say, I didn't have to spend a single day in jail. But he might have to spend a couple of days waiting for his pardon. A lawyer for Guo declined to comment, but Guo is almost certain to appeal the verdict. That'll keep him out, too. Guo smiled at his lawyers as the jury walked out, hugged attorney Sabrina Schroff, and shook the hands of other members of the defense team. The outspoken businessman, also known as, I didn't know this, Ho Wan Kwok or Miles Guo, I've heard Miles Guo, but was tried before jurors whose names were kept secret. An unusual move designed to shield them in a case that has drawn intense interest. So, is that just a different pronunciation of Guo Wen Gi or Gui, like Guo or Ho, and Wan Kwok instead of Wen Gui? I don't know. This is Chinese experts will have to help them. Wen Gui or Wan Kwok, like, I don't know. I've seen, like in Korean, the anglicization of the Korean sometimes takes liberties with whether it's a G or a K in the translation. So I don't know. Maybe that's it. I got no idea. Otherwise, why so many aliases? I don't know. If you're moving in the $37 million super yacht and $1 million Lamborghini circles, you might as well have 16 different names as well. Anyway, the outspoken businessman was tried before jurors whose names were kept secret, and that was unusual, appealing to a huge online following, which I know nothing about, but it seems to be working for him. Guo raised money from investors for seemingly legitimate businesses, but diverted the funds to spend on himself and his family, and in some cases Steve Bannon. The trial involved weeks of testimony from investors drawn to Guo through his public critique of the Chinese Communist Party, as well as from luxury car dealers who sold him rare vehicles, and a managing director at Kyle Bass's hedge fund, Heyman Capital Management, which ran a hedge fund that the government said Guo invested $100 million of the stolen funds in. Neither Bass, Heyman, nor Bannon was accused of wrongdoing in the case, but probably should have been. Videos from his super yacht are described next. Guo amassed his social media following through his videos, recorded from his penthouse at the Sherry Netherland Hotel overlooking New York's Central Park, or from the deck of his 152-foot super yacht. Guo claimed his fortune came from his wealthy real estate developer family in China, but a portion of his wealth, federal prosecutors said, also came from stealing $1 billion through bogus investment opportunities he hawked online. The jury began its deliberations on Thursday, but was forced to start over with an alternate juror, after a member of the panel admitted to Googling the name of a co-defendant who is still at large. The defense urged the jurors not to let Guo's expensive tastes cloud their judgment, claiming he flaunted his wealth as a form of protest against the Communist Party. Oh, okay. So he wasn't just an a-hole. He was baiting the communists. Sure. The prosecution had its own framing. Is Miles Guo a real political activist? Assistant U.S. Attorney Juliana Murray said Thursday during the closing arguments, "I don't know and I don't care because that's not what this trial is about." But yeah, interesting. Trying to blur the lines here in the same way that Donald Trump has tried to do, right? You know, they're prosecuting me because they want to interfere in the election. This is election interference and it shouldn't be allowed. But are you a presidential candidate like for real, or are you just campaigning to get yourself out of prison, or what? Now, some bit about his mysterious background as we head into the mysterious void of our third break here. The case explored Guo's mysterious background, and we'll continue doing it after the break because it is interesting, including the fleeing persecution in China, his ties to Bannon, and how he came to pour millions into Hayman Capitals. Hayman. That's the Grogger noise. That probably sounds worse than it needed to. But okay. Hayman. Hayman. What a name to choose. Hayman Capital's high-risk wager against the Hong Kong dollar. So, some very political investments. Bannon was on Guo's yacht off the coast of Connecticut. Yes, Connecticut, in 2020 when the political advisor was arrested on charges that he conspired to siphon hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Wall Project. Remember that? Hope so.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's read about the rest of Guo Wengi. It's worth having these pieces of the puzzle, I think, in front of mind. So we were talking about, we got to the segment of the section of the article about his mysterious background, and which, just to repeat, get ourselves back on track here, that the case just concluded in his conviction explored Guo's mysterious background, including fleeing persecution in China, maybe, because that's part of the theory too. Then maybe he's not really fleeing. Maybe he's actually a chaos agent of the Chinese Communist Party. People have said as much. His ties to Bannon, which is always a shady thing to do, and how he came to pour millions into Hayman Capital's high-risk wager against the Hong Kong dollar. Bannon was on Guo's yacht off the coast of Connecticut when he was arrested on charges that he had conspired to siphon hundreds of thousands of dollars from a campaign to finance a wall on the southern border. Trump pardoned Bannon for that crime just before leaving office. In 2020, Guo transferred $100 million raised through an illicit stock offering in his GTV media group, and he diverted that money to the Hayman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund, which held a position that the country's currency pegged to the U.S. dollar would collapse, according to prosecutors. Bannon introduced Guo and Bass, a longtime China skeptic. Bannon himself was paid $1 million as a consultant to GTV's parent company, Saraka Media Group, whatever that is. Evidence presented at the trial showed after Hayman received the investment, Bannon emailed Bass. What did he email him? "Congrats on the Miles deal," Bannon wrote. According to an email presented as evidence, he thinks you are, I guess he loves to text like the kids, he thinks you are biggest superstar in finance. A month later, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission contacted Heyman to inquire about the source of these funds. When Bass asked Guo's financial advisor for an explanation, he got no reply. He must have had his stomach drop. By that point, close to $30 million had been lost in the unsuccessful currency wager. The remaining $70 million was eventually handed over to authorities. Guo was acquitted on Tuesday of fraud related to the stock offering in GTV and of unlawful monetary transactions in connection with the $100 million transfer to the Heyman hedge fund, but convicted on other things apparently. Then next up, a $530 million SEC settlement. In 2021, 3 Guo-linked companies, including GTV, agreed to pay $539 million to settle the SEC's investigation into unregistered stock offerings. According to prosecutors, other Guo scams involved an exclusive private members-only club with a minimum $10,000 buy-in, a crypto platform called the Himalaya Exchange, and a farm loan program. Interesting. By the way, I've heard some other interesting new pronunciations of what we in English call Himalaya, but Himalaya and others. I'm curious about what's the most preferred internationally. But anyway, the government alleged Guo also peeled off investor funds to spend on luxuries, including a red Lamborghini, a $4 million Ferrari for his son, that's nice, and a $26 million New Jersey mansion. Hey, terrific. He was thinking about giving it to Bob Menendez, probably. The case is U.S. versus Guo, and it was prosecuted, of course, in the Southern District of New York. That seems like an awkward way of ending the article, but I don't know if that's how they did it in the online official version, but that's the way it ends in Pocket. So, okay, we're up to speed on that. I'm sure he'll stay out of prison pending appeal and see if he can stretch it out. And I'm sure he's hoping against hope that Donald Trump gets himself in a position either by election or insurrection to issue pardons. We shall see. Okay, other stories to share with you today. Let's see. I'm still trying to sort of decide on the fly which ones to try to do live and which ones to hold for next week, and see if I can cobble together some shows to share with you then. How about a couple of other short bits that might be of interest to you? For instance, this piece here, this has been discussed and made the news a couple of times, and I'm pulling from The Guardian here, but we haven't had a chance to discuss this yet. Biden to reportedly push for Supreme Court term limits and a new ethics code. Some Supreme Court reforms in the offing. What are they, and how do they compare to the ones that we've discussed on the air? The more interesting one for me being the idea of rotating circuit court judges into a larger pool so that they can sort of randomly pick a Supreme Court for each term. I think that's a very good idea. Lois Beckett writing this piece for The Guardian. Biden to reportedly push for Supreme Court term limits and a new ethics code. I don't know whether that gets you anywhere. President is also considering support for a constitutional amendment to eliminate immunity for top office holders. In other words, they'll overturn the presidential immunity decision handed down by the Supreme Court with a constitutional amendment saying, no, whatever the judicial interpretation, however wrong it's been, whatever it says, we want to clarify. From now on, the Constitution will say no to that explicitly, and then presumably you'll be stuck. But then again, this Constitution explicitly says that insurrectionists can't serve, and they said, well, maybe they can. Anyway, Joe Biden plans to endorse term limits for Supreme Court justices and a new ethics code, the Washington Post reported, and we should probably take a look at their reporting of it as well, as an emboldened right-wing court continues to upend U.S. legal precedent despite operating under the cloud of multiple ethics scandals. That's right. Biden is also mulling whether to call for a new constitutional amendment that would eliminate this sweeping immunity for presidents and other officials, the Post reported, citing two unnamed people familiar with the president's thinking. By the way, did I not see the Post article on this yet? Biden set to announce support for major Supreme Court changes. Plans, they include exactly what The Guardian repeats. It said Tyler Pager and Michael Scherer. Why didn't I see this piece? And are we better off reading that one, or are we better off reading The Guardian's summation of it? I mean, I like The Guardian's take on things, generally speaking. Well, let's stick with the reading here. The court's ruling on July 1st establishing sweeping immunity for U.S. presidents has been widely criticized as an attack on the rule of law. It is, that gives presidents the power of a king. In recent weeks, Biden had a phone call with Lawrence Tribe, a leading constitutional scholar, to discuss Tribe's opinion piece in The Guardian. That's a hook. Proposing concrete steps to reform the Supreme Court, which included new term limits, an enforceable ethics code, and an amendment limiting presidential immunity, the Post reported. And I mean, as long as you're amending the Constitution along the way, why not amend or add the code of ethics to the Constitution so that it can't be, interpreted right back out of the law by the same court it's supposed to apply to. Maybe someone should be thinking about that. Or maybe they have and have concluded that it doesn't work somehow. I don't know. But it seems to me that, even a statutory ethics code can be swept aside by these guys. Yeah, maybe even a constitutional one, like I said. Not just the 14th Amendment swept aside, but also the Emoluments Clause. So to hell with everything. Anyway, among additional reforms Americans should consider, Tribe wrote that in that piece, was the idea of creating several added seats on the court to offset the way Trump as president stacked the court in favor of his MAGA agenda. But adding justices to the court, as some Democratic members of Congress have advocated for, is not among the reforms that Biden is currently considering. According to the Post, anyway, Biden has long been seen as unwilling to expand the court. Why? Not sure. Tribe did not immediately respond to a request for comment from The Guardian. The president previewed his plans for Supreme Court reform in a Zoom call with Congressional Progressive Caucus on Saturday, before or after the shooting. Probably before. When did that happen? Like in the evening, right? Or late afternoon, early evening. So anyway, the Post reported this, citing a transcript of the call that included Biden telling members that I'm about to come out with a major initiative on limiting the court, and that he had been working with constitutional scholars for the last 3 months. The Supreme Court's approval rating and polls with the American public has dropped sharply, as you know. I don't know that we need to go over those numbers any further. Shall we see? How long is the Washington Post piece on this? I don't know that we're going to extract anything extra from that, actually. Although, I feel like we owed it to them as the original reporters there, but I think probably everything has been well covered there. Just wanted to let you know that, yes, it's true that their reporting is out there that Biden has been making noise about the Supreme Court's whether or not he has the most aggressive reforms in mind. That we have no reason to believe from these articles say no. It's actually something lower key. All right, let's see a couple other articles that I've been holding on to for a little while that I might as well squeeze in the final minutes to this week's last live show. Judge dismisses Giuliani's bankruptcy case. You probably heard that news. If you didn't, don't panic. That's a good thing. What does it mean? Judge dismisses Giuliani's bankruptcy case, allowing creditors to try to seize his assets. In other words, his case was, will you afford me bankruptcy protection? Will you give me a chance to try to negotiate a payment plan out of this thing such that my assets are protected? And the answer was no. So, Caitlin Polance reports for CNN back on last Friday, July 12th, that Rudy Giuliani is no longer entitled to bankruptcy protection, a judge decided on Friday, making it possible for creditors to immediately pursue his assets within days. How do you like that? By the way, he is at the convention, and, showing no signs of remorse. I think he actually gave a speech in which he said, no, I'd do it all over again, all the things that he ended up in serious trouble for and is now losing control of all of his assets for, all of his attacks on Georgia election workers, all of his lies to the press, all of his idiocy that led him to stand outside of a landscaping company and claim that the election was stolen. No regrets from this guy, apparently. And also of some interest, he was very closely filmed and photographed walking around the convention floor and then tripping and falling into the seats. So that, it should stand in stark contrast. You should, I guess you should air that alongside any complaints that Biden is old and moves funny because, now he's not the candidate, that's true, but why not show Rudy Giuliani his star collapsing into a black hole at this point. All right. So the former mayor of New York sought bankruptcy protection after a jury awarded two Georgia election workers $148 million because Giuliani defamed them after the 2020 election. The judge's decision on Friday to end his bankruptcy paves the way for Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, as well as other creditors who are trying to collect on the more than $150 million that Giuliani owes. He doesn't have that money. He doesn't have anything close to it. But can we take what he's got? The judge says yes. So when do we see it happen? Judge Sean Lane of the Bankruptcy Court, Federal Bankruptcy Court in New York, made the decision partly because of Giuliani's lack of transparency after he filed for bankruptcy more than 6 months ago. So he did it to himself. Lane highlighted in his 22-page opinion that Giuliani hadn't provided any insight whatsoever into the books of companies that he solely owns and that have taken in thousands of dollars in wire transfers in recent weeks. The judge also said Giuliani hasn't been fully transparent with his creditors, such as by not fully explaining on time an upcoming book contract that he has, or keeping his personal earnings from a radio show and podcast coming into one of the corporate accounts. I'm sure Giuliani claimed that should have been protected from the claims somehow, but unless you show your books and explain yourselves, at some point the judge is allowed to lose patience with you and say, to hell with it. None of it is protected. Anything that we can prove you have control of, we can seize. Mr. Giuliani has failed to provide an accurate and complete picture of his financial affairs in the 6 months that this case has been pending. Lane wrote in his decision Friday, the lack of financial transparency is particularly troubling given concerns that Mr. Giuliani is engaged in self-dealing and that he has potential conflicts of interest that would hamper the administration of his bankruptcy case. Giuliani, once Time Magazine's Person of the Year and a fixture in New York society, Anyway, says he is now worth about $10.6 million, with nearly all of that wealth in the value of 2 apartments he owns in New York City and Palm Beach, Florida, where he can go to the Sex Dungeon Club with Donald Trump. Moss and Freeman plan to seek liens on these properties in the coming days, according to their lawyers. In a statement provided by a spokesman, Giuliani cast himself Friday as a man being punished for his role in politics in recent years. Oh, but also crimes. We will continue to pursue justice, and we are confident that in the long run our system of justice will be restored. We'll put a new president in who will just suspend the system of justice if necessary. Yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. In addition to the $6 million, 3-bedroom co-op apartment. Imagine a 3 billion bedroom apartment. A $6 million 3-bedroom co-op apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and a $3.5 million condo on the Intracoastal Waterway in Florida. Giuliani's creditors will also be able to try to seize his bank accounts, a Mercedes-Benz sports car. Was it a gratuity? A bribe? I don't know. His collection of 26 luxury watches, 3 World Series championship rings for the New York Yankees, and other baseball memorabilia like a signed Joe DiMaggio shirt he claims to own. How about that? The worth of those other assets is unclear, as creditors accuse Giuliani of downplaying or not disclosing complete estimates of the value of what he owns. The creditors believe one World Series ring alone could sell for nearly $30,000, according to court filings in his bankruptcy case. Giuliani also says bankruptcy filings in the state of California, owes him more than $10,000 related to overpaid taxes for his appearance on the TV singing game show The Masked Singer, according to bankruptcy filings. Okay, that won't, really help with the $100 million judgment, but okay. Giuliani also said in filings in recent weeks that he expects to be paid tens of thousands of dollars for various ventures, coffee beans being marketed with his name and image. Why? Who cares? And a documentary that's been in the works for years. The court decision on Friday, announced by Lane in White Plains, New York, marks a long, slow decline for Giuliani, now collapsing into the seats on the floor of the Republican convention, largely related to his work as a lawyer for former President Donald Trump after the 2020 election. Giuliani lost his law license in New York last week, so if you've seen it, maybe he left it in a cab or something like that. Oh, no, he lost it because he had pushed false information. Yeah, that's right. In court, challenging the election results on behalf of Trump. He's also fighting criminal charges in Arizona and Georgia related to Trump's effort to undermine his electoral loss. Giuliani has pleaded not guilty in both cases, but he's lying. He actually is guilty. Giuliani agreed to end his bankruptcy proceedings after Freeman and Moss suggested that approach earlier this week. They and other creditors have become furious with the lack of transparency that he provided into his assets. He was trying to hide them and keep them, and he's guilty of that, and they should just take him away already. The creditors argue to the judge in recent days that Giuliani was exploiting the bankruptcy system to avoid having to pay his debts, and he was acting in bad faith. That accusation, apparently true, prompted outbursts from Giuliani in court, claiming he was the one being defamed, but the judge said, actually, you're the jackass here. Get the hell out of here. In addition to Moss and Freeman, Giuliani also owes $1 million in taxes, so he owes it to you, tens of thousands of dollars in unpaid phone bills, and more than $1 million to a law firm where a close friend, maybe he's not a close friend anymore, represented him through past investigations. Several other companies and people, such as a former assistant and the voting machine companies Smartmatic and Dominion, are suing him too. So good. I'm glad to see his ultimate destruction, but they should snatch the suit right off him that he's wearing while he's falling down into the chairs at the Republican convention and make him show up in a barrel, strapped over his shoulders, like the old cartoons. Although maybe it's best if he remains mostly covered. Bodily, anyway. So, yeah, there's that as well. Let's see, a couple other stories. I think I have to click through some things and open them up and read them. Oh, well, what the hell? Let's add this one, too. I'm making my decisions on the fly here. But maybe it would be, let's see what some of these blue sky tweets are. Yeah, okay, no, we already have heard that story as well. So just making sure we got that news story through other means, but it was basically, I guess, still stuck in pocket when Trump was making his motions to have his cases dismissed. He's also made a motion to have the New York convictions thrown out. That's what I was opening up, but that's kind of old news at this point. Okay, let's see. A couple of other stories here, and maybe why not read about, I should save some of these small pieces here for filling out my programming hopes, anyway, for next week. And, well, here's something of interest. As we were talking about constitutional amendments in the offing, let's read this piece in the few minutes that we have left. A House Democrat is proposing a constitutional amendment to reverse the Supreme Court's immunity decision. And as we know, that has, I guess, I don't know whether that's the one that caught Joe Biden's attention, but that too is in the offing for Supreme Court reform. So let's read a little bit more in depth about at least one of these proposals. This is Lisa Mascaro reporting for the AP, a leading House Democrat. How leading is he? Let's find out. A leading House Democrat is preparing a constitutional amendment in response to the Supreme Court's landmark immunity ruling, seeking to reverse the decision and ensure that no president is above the law. And how top is he? Well, he's the top Democrat on the House Administration Committee. Do you know who that might be? It is Representative Joseph Morelle. Does he say Morelle? I don't know. Morelle. Joseph Morelle. I don't know him. Of New York. Again, top Dem on House Administration Committee, and he sent a letter to colleagues informing them of his intent to file the resolution, which would kickstart what's traditionally a cumbersome amendment process. This amendment will do what SCOTUS failed to do, prioritize our democracy, Morelle said in a statement to AP. In referring to Donald Trump, he said the former president must be held accountable for his decisions. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment and stand with me on the front line to protect our democracy. Of course, under the current makeup of the House, not much chance of getting it through, but well worth making the proposal. And I guess it has caught the notice of the president and others as well, or at least the idea has. And sometimes more than one person has these ideas and even proposes them as, on the floor. But it's the most significant legislative response yet, it is said, to the decision this week, meaning last week, from the court's conservative majority, which stunned Washington and drew a sharp dissent from the court's liberal justices, warning of the perils to democracy, particularly as Trump seeks a return to the White House. Still, the effort stands almost no chance of succeeding in this Congress. Writing for the majority, now talking about the case itself, John Roberts said that presidents have broad immunity from criminal prosecution for actions taken within their official duties, a decision that throws into doubt the Justice Department's case against Trump, including his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Trump and his allies celebrated the ruling by the court, which includes 3 justices appointed by the former president, and his legal team immediately moved to delay sentencing in his felony convictions in an unrelated hush money case in New York State court that had been scheduled for next week. The judge agreed to push off the sentencing until fall, though it was absolutely not necessary. The outcome all but ensures the federal cases against Trump will not be resolved before the November election, when he faces a likely rematch with President Joe Biden, while the constitutional amendment process would likely take years and, in fact, may never come to fruition. Supporters believe it is the most surefire way, even beyond a new law, to enshrine the norm that presidents can face consequences for their actions. This amendment will guarantee, if it ever passes and gets ratified, that no public officer of the United States, including the president, is able to evade the accountability that any other American would face for violating our laws, Morelle wrote in a letter to colleagues this week. He quoted from Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who led the dissent, and Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who joined in dissenting, before summing up, in his own words, presidents are citizens, not tyrants. Another Democrat, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, perhaps you've heard of her, said on Monday that she planned to file articles of impeachment against the justices over the ruling, well, 2 justices in particular anyway, which she said represents an assault on American democracy. It's up to Congress to defend our nation from this authoritarian capture, Ocasio-Cortez said on social media. I intend on filing articles of impeachment upon our return, and indeed, she did do so. Congress can launch the constitutional amendment process and then send it to the states for ratification. Such a resolution takes a 2/3 vote of both the House and the Senate, which is unlikely at this time of divided government. And even if there turns out to be a Democratic majority in both houses next term, let's say, and it's proposed again, getting to 2/3, well, that's really something. Difficult these days, particularly in this time, as they say, almost euphemistically, of divided government, and ratification by 3/4 of the states. And so far, there have been 27 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, a helpful addition at the end. Not really. And that is kind of euphemistic. And by the way, getting a 2/3 vote in, as they say, this time of divided government It's really not that it's divided government. It's that it's polarized partisanship is the issue. Divided government doesn't really have much to do with it. The division of when we talk about divided government, we're talking about control of the legislative and executive branches being in different hands, or at least partially in different hands. And the president plays no role in the constitutional amendment process, except for perhaps calling for a constitutional amendment and endorsing it. But there's the president doesn't sign the, constitutional amendment into existence or anything like that. So, all right, well, anyway, it's just sort of the wrong focus and an example of the AP sort of speaking euphemistically rather than saying that what should be a constitutional amendment that should be ratified overwhelmingly. The presidents aren't above the law. We used to say it all the time, repeat it as a mantra. So it's not difficult to explain to people. It's a broadly popular topic, but we won't be able to pass it because of the partisan divisions in this country, not because of divided government, but because of partisan divisions within the branches of government and among the populace in general. So I don't know. I just thought I would clarify that for you as a way of doing you one last service as I make my way out the door for the week and for next week as well. Working hard to try to bring you some new content for next week, but as always, you find it's difficult to do among the errands in the last minute for getting ready. It's very hard to go on vacation and packing, etc., etc. But I'll be out in the west of the country visiting some national parks before they're destroyed by a possible Trump administration or, whatever else. Among them, Yellowstone National Park, and that may be destroyed by the Earth itself at some point. And so I thought I'd visit it before it turns super volcano in a million years. I have a lot of time. But I won't be around for those million years, so I'm going to go and visit it. Grand Tetons, the West, touring a couple of states I've never set foot in before. It should be fun and a good time. Will be had by all. That's my prediction. Next prediction, what comes next? Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy here on Netroots Radio. Some idea of what's coming up. Of course, Trump keeps falling asleep at the Republican National Convention, including I saw a photo during his son's speech. That's pretty funny. And also, just released financial reports, for instance, that show a conservative group made a last-ditch play to influence the Oregon primary in a high-profile congressional race.
Netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Look what else is here. Cal Lutheran University in Thousand Oaks, California, filing charges against libs of TikTok for a doctored viral post in which a professor wishes Trump dead. Oh my, well, gee whiz, who could possibly want that to happen? Well, that's just nasty. Anyway, we'll see you after next week. Take care.